All right, if you're here, then you're interested in learning about how to utilize LandKit inside of Revit. We're going to be focusing on a beta file that we've created with the Topo Workflow, which allows us to continually manipulate and update and change our geometry inside of Rhino, and it will automatically update and preview that inside of the Revit file as well. Additionally, we'll be able to transfer that geometry out of the Rhino file into the Revit file whenever we're ready to do so. This is a beta file, so please let us know about any bugs or issues you have so that we can optimize it for the future and for other users. And if you're interested in learning a little bit more about how these workflows function or exploring some of the other workflows, please go to landkit.design and check out our workflows there, download some, and try them out in the Rhino file. And we'll eventually develop these further to be utilized inside of Revit as well with some of the other kits and functionality that we have for LandKit. Okay, so the first thing I want to take note of is the tab up here that says Rhino.Inside. This is the plugin that is needed in order to be able to use Rhino and Grasshopper inside of the Revit space. So this is a free plugin that can be downloaded from the McNeil website, which is the developer of Rhino. And once you download that and install it, you'll be able to open up your Revit file and see this tab, and it will allow you to utilize the functionality that pairs Revit and Rhino together in one sort of workflow. Once you hit this button over here to the left, you'll be able to utilize these buttons. And the first one you'll click is the Rhino button, which will open up a Rhino file. From there, you can load or drag and drop your Rhino file into this window, and you can open up the Topo Workflow, which will have your layers set up for you to use. And then what you'll do is you'll have to launch Grasshopper. So you can either press this button here, or you can type in Grasshopper to open up your Grasshopper canvas. It will open up your Grasshopper, and you'll be able to see a new tab that's called the Revit tab that has a series of components. You will drag and drop your Topo Workflow Revit file into this canvas, and it will load the workflow, which will automatically minimize your Grasshopper, and you will no longer need to utilize the Grasshopper window. You can just focus on utilizing the functionality found here in the workflow panel here. So the usage of it is pretty straightforward. Everything is pretty much the same as the typical workflows, with the exception of the output, which we have shrunk down the bake into Rhino buttons so that we can focus on providing space for the Revit baking. You'll see that we have a few toggles here and a little bit of information talking about them. This is just a preview currently in here, but once I click these toggles on, it's going to activate the baking, which will translate the geometry live from our Rhino file into our Revit file. So you can see I can now click these and select the different pieces of geometry we have in here. A few things to note is that when I select these, you can actually see, holding my cursor over top, it actually identifies it as a wall, and you can see that up here as well. Stairs will become stairs, and so on and so forth. But we've also translated these areas into floors, so that you can utilize some of the functionality of floors with these areas as well for your site model. If you were to do something like baking out, for instance, the mesh preview option, it would come in as a topo solid, which allows you to utilize it in relation to your some of your site modeling functions inside of Revit. But you'll also notice, too, that when I select these items, a little pin, a little red pin will appear. And you can see that each of the different objects or pieces of geometry in here has this little pin. This means that the geometry is still locked and paired with your Grasshopper components that are being utilized to create the link between these two files. Once you have all these selected, you can navigate to the Rhino.Inside, and you can click the Release Elements button. Once you do this, it will disconnect all of your geometry from your Rhino file, and you no longer need your Rhino file because all of your geometry is now natively inside of the Revit file. One thing to make note of while we're here is that while each of these have their own identifiable class here of walls and floors and so on and so forth, the geometry that's coming out of the Grasshopper file and Rhino file into Revit are what's called direct shapes, which fall somewhere between actual Revit walls and then just sort of generic geometry. So you won't actually be able to manipulate this geometry. You can move it around, and you can do different analysis or annotation tools on here, and I'll show you one in a minute. But the actual changing of the different pieces of this geometry and modifying the geometry directly to change its form or shape will not be possible using the direct shape geometry that's coming out into the Revit file. So we're going to show you that this works just well with a lot of the functionality inside of Revit now once you have that geometry in. So we're going to navigate here to our floor plan, which shows our plan view. I'll even change this to the shaded view so it's a little bit easier to see. So we have here now our geometry and plan view that we can see. And what we're going to do is we're going to go over to the view and we're going to add a section. So I'm going to draw my section sort of right here through the middle, kind of overlapping some other key features here, like the swale condition and the paths in the center of this plaza. And then what we'll see here is that we'll see that we have a section that appears on our project browser over here. I can double click that, and now you can see that we have our section. I can change this to the shaded view, and we can actually visualize that section as well. If I navigate back to my plan view, as many of you will know who are Revit users, you can extend the view of that particular section's background. And then when we come back into our section view, you can actually see the wall and the stairs and the tops of the path and the mounds as well. So a great set of tools inside of Revit that you can now utilize with the land kit functionality. It's a great way to begin to move into Revit if you're sort of already in the Rhino space and utilizing LandKit, or if you're primarily a Revit user and you want to start using some of these landscape modeling tools that LandKit offers. This is a great avenue to approach it from.